We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
Is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Time, weather, and
Veteran of 3 foreign wars, entrepreneur, and warrior poet, Tony Arterburn takes on the issues facing our country, civilization, and planet. This is the Arterburn radio transmission.
Got the weirdest feeling today when I was going over the headlines. I feel like it's tomorrow's news today is what I should have been saying. That's an old InfoWars tagline, but looking at some of the things that are coming out, you notice that, I mean, I go back to the spring of 2020. Oh, past Tony. Go back and look at some of those clips, not all the time, but sometimes they'll pop up on my feed, and Facebook recently started deleting old videos, and so I tried to archive some stuff, and I was going back looking at what I was saying in the spring of 2020, and some of it was prescient, you know, and depending on how much you pay attention, you look at these headlines today, it's like we're going to get into stuff on geoengineering, and that's last minute, by the way, because I was looking, you know, obviously the distraction is whatever the headline is, and then you look at that, and it's usually clown show stuff, clown world order. We'll talk about some of the geoengineering stuff and all the geopolitical financial things, ladies and gentlemen. It's crazy. Last week I was saying happy birthday, ironically, to the Illuminati for, you know, May 1st, 1776. I opened up the show that way. But today is May 8th. Does anybody know what that day is? That's Harry Truman's birthday, but it's also something else, and I'll get into that here in a second. One of the first articles I saw up on Drudge when I was doing my research for the show. But welcome back, folks. This is the Arterburn radio transmission. I am your host, Tony Arterburn. I'm broadcasting in defiance of globalist goblins, the neocons, and the New World Order here from the Wolfpack.Gold studios in beautiful Branson, Missouri. I'm joined by my co-pilot and co-host just off screen, Beans the Brave, ladies and gentlemen. She's here to keep us safe from bad vibes, woodland creatures, intruders, anything that may disturb the transmission. So glad to have her here. All right. So it's May 8th. It's Harry Truman's birthday. And if you don't know, Harry Truman was the 33rd president of the United States, of which he disputed, by the way. He said he shouldn't have been the 33rd president because Grover Cleveland was elected twice, and so he thought that math was off. But he was the 33rd president, and of course presided over the end of World War II. Franklin Roosevelt elected to a fourth term. It's interesting, all the talk now about undoing what's the 22nd Amendment, so we can have multiple terms. But Franklin Roosevelt, fourth term, died in office in April of 1945. Harry Truman takes over and presides over the end of World War II. And it just happens to be his birthday coincided with VE Day, which is Victory in Europe Day. So check this headline out. This is interesting. Just a little bit of parapolitics, hidden history, and other things as we start to look down the barrel of our daily news feed. Now let's check this article out. This was up on Drudge, but it's linked over to Fortune magazine. Trump just declared May 8th a national holiday. And they ask, what's open and closed? President Trump announced 2 new national holidays on Monday, including one that would fall just days later on Thursday, May 8th. Here's what you need to know about it. On Monday, Donald Trump took to social media to announce he was establishing 2 new national holidays, one which would fall just days later. The holidays, he said, were meant to commemorate the ends of World War I and World War II. So November 11th and May 8th. And this is what President Trump had to say. We won 2 world wars, but we never took credit for it. Everyone else does, Trump wrote on Truth Social. All over the world, the Allies are celebrating the victory we had in World War II. The only country that doesn't celebrate is the United States of America, and the victory was only accomplished because of us. It was an announcement that raised all sorts of questions. Would there be a new day off? November 11th, Veterans Day, is already a national holiday. Does Trump even have the power to declare a national holiday? This is what the article asked. Well, just again, just a little bit of history here. World War I, we should have never been in for any stretch of the imagination. Bankers' War comes to mind. You're talking about a complete construct that should have never happened. Just the slaughter pens of technology in the 20th century meet the tactics of the 19th century. Just an awful, awful thing. Just a bloodletting, a ritual, if you will. And matter of fact, you talk about World War I. I mean, just a little bit of history. November 11th, I mean, it was the Armistice Day in 1918. Millions dead. I mean, the French, everybody gives the French a hard time, because the Maginot Line and, just not standing up, or supposedly not standing up to the Third Reich or whatever in the late 1930s, and all that, the retaking of the Rhineland and all that stuff that happened in the mid 30s. But they give the French a hard time. Well, they lost an entire generation of people. Like, there wasn't enough men to go around to be married. Like, and there was also a lot of the genetic pool of the French changed because of World War I, because so many men that were over 6 feet tall couldn't hide in the trenches as well, and they were killed. So, I mean, you change the entire demographic and future of a nation. That's war often does that. And, they were the most affected. I mean, unlike the English, that was where a lot of the fighting took place. And November 11th, again, we'll go back to that Armistice Day, which happens to be George Patton's birthday also. But November 11th was the 11th day, 11th month, 11th hour, so 33, and they did this ceremony to like close up that whatever they had done to open it up in the first place. There's a lot of the esoteric stuff that floats around through that. And World War I caused the United States to form the America First coalition, and we rejected, thank God, we rejected the League of Nations and all the things that were all the internationalists wanted to impose on us after the war. It was like 150,000 U.S. troops that were killed, and not to mention hundreds of thousands wounded and maimed and other things. And then the country just threw up its hand and go, for what? What did we get for that? We were supposed to make the world safe for democracy, and we made it safe for Hitler and Stalin. And just I like the idea that we have historical holidays. Like, you have President's Day, but it's supposed to be Washington or Lincoln's birthday or something like that. And we should talk about Thomas Jefferson and other great presidents, but not Lincoln's not in there, but other presidents like Jefferson and Washington. You should do that, but then you make it, you neutralize it, you neuter it when you put in other presidents. Like, we talk about Millard Fillmore. We're going to talk about Jimmy Carter. We're going to put all those together. I mean, that's kind of a dilution, but any kind of historical holiday is good. However, let's. I mean, again, historical context is always very important, and I want to just for your own your knowledge, if you want to take away. This is the kind of questions that I ask when we say we won World War I. Well, we came in at the last minute to bail out the British. We bailed out the British out of the Second World War, and that's why, 2 world wars, the British used to have the world's reserve currency, the British pound sterling. The sun never set on the British Empire. That was something that was said throughout the 19th century. And by the, end of the 1940s, they were an aircraft carrier for the United States government and military, as Gore Vidal said. So that's what war can do to you. It can wreck your treasury. It can, basically stifle your empire. It can completely dismantle your civilization if you let it. So it's not accurate to say that we alone did that. Let's just look some facts and figures. And if you ever ask I've had many conversations with Russians and Ukrainians over the years, just curious, because a lot of those people have a great historical sense. I learned this when I was a young soldier on the border of Kosovo and Serbia and talking to some of the Russian paratroopers, but they usually have a great historical sense. Does anybody really throw out the amount of deaths that the Soviet Union endured during World War II to take on Hitler's Third Reich? Let's just look at this. It's about 27 million, both civilian and military, from all war-related causes. Although exact figures are disputed, a figure of 20 million was considered official. Think about that. So let's say it's 20 million. That's a staggering number. You're talking about the early to mid 20th century. And, the population of the United States in 1947 was about 145 million. So, if you just adjusted that for current numbers, that would be staggering today if we were involved in something like that. So history is not all, it's not a simple, it's not a simple task to be able to put that in terms of understanding it. And there's lots of stuff that goes with this, with World War II. A lot of people call it the Good War. And when Winston Churchill was asked what they should call, and this is Churchill, by the way, and that's where Pat Buchanan got the title of this book. But it's a great, if you ever have a chance, you should absolutely read Pat Buchanan's Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. That's what Churchill said it should be called. It should be the Unnecessary War. It should never have happened. Again, we made World War I, we made not safe for democracy, safe for Hitler and Stalin. We imposed a Carthaginian peace on the Germans. The war debts and all the rest is ripe for, a fascist takeover. And they've just set up every condition. A lot of times that's what they want. History, again, is not this organic flow like the court historians want you to see it. But there's something else to this too, and then I'll move on. Just food for thought about World War II is we're going to have a new holiday, which I think is great. And I think it starts conversations. But back in 1941, the war officially kicked off in 1939, right after Germany invaded Poland. There's a reason for that. If you look at the geopolitics of the time and what Germany was trying to do with the reunification and everything that was taken in the Treaty of Versailles, so German-speaking peoples, the port of Danzig, which was in Polish territory, and there was a lot offered by the German government to the Poles, but they had a war guarantee from the British. So it was actually the British that declared war on Germany in 1939. And of course, that set up it shocked the German government. They didn't want war with the British. They were, if you read Mein Kampf and you understood the philosophy there, they were going to turn on the Soviet Union eventually for Lebensraum, which meant living space. That's the whole, they broadcast it. It's so funny. That's what happens today with things like the Great Reset. And it's like, where did you get that information, Tony? They literally say it, so you just have to look into what they were, what their goals were back in the 1930s and moving forward. People forget, though, and people think that we had this deal with the British, and we did have some. We get Lend-Lease, and we give some equipment away and other stuff like that. And we would trade some of the British territory for supplies and other things. But the State Department, the foreign policy of the United States was neutrality. And it wasn't until Operation Barbarossa, June 22nd, 1941, where Hitler turned on his former ally, he turned on Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. That's when all the bells and whistles and everything went. Now the alarm bells went off in the night for the State Department here in the United States. And you can go look at this history. That's when they got animated. That's when they wanted to get into the war. Not when he was, the Battle of Britain and all the things, and not Dunkirk, and not taking on the British, because that was a sideshow to the Third Reich. But they offended, right? The senses and the ideology of the United States Foreign Office, right? The State Department, when Hitler took on the communists. So thank you, Joe McCarthy, for showing us how that all worked later on. So just a little history lesson there for you folks. And history's happening all around us. We're going to talk a little bit too about the prices of precious metals today. Bitcoin back over 100,000. I knew that was coming. It's so funny. Like, when it's going down, it's never coming back, and when it's going up, it's never going down. It reminds me a lot of how the general public and just regular folk look at business. When you're doing well, you can never fail, and when you're not doing well, you're an idiot. You never get back up. That's just life is. It's a long road. You have to be prepared for the long outlook, the 37,000 foot view, if you will. And I'll get to some comments too. Let's bounce around a little bit. I got a hodgepodge of stuff today. It's going to be fun. And I saw this article too. Let's jump into this, and then we'll do some metals. I'll talk about what's going on with the gold market. But I was reading Zero Hedge, and it's so funny. I find myself doing this a lot these days. Like, I'll think something, and because I'm really working on that, on controlling like how I think of something or the words that I use, I'll think something, and then I'll go and all of a sudden what I thought was, I know this is kind of woo-woo, but a lot of what I thought is actually manifested. So without getting too deep in the weeds on that, there was an article on Zero Hedge about the fourth turning. And Neil Strauss was on there, and of course Strauss and how they wrote the book The Fourth Turning, and you guys have heard me talk about that cyclical history. Every 80 to 100 years, there's this major upheaval in society. So they were given an overview of what our politics here, like the Trump administration and the America First ideology, that again, we can have arguments of what's behind that, but that's what's driving this fourth turning, and then other nationalist movements around the world. And I thought, well, they're leaving something out. They're leaving out the technocracy. And so I go over to technocracy.news, and he took the exact same article with Patrick Wood and put it up. And it was on the front page of technocracy.news. And so we'll go into both, like his analysis of it and what it means. I think both of these takes are good, because in one way, the Zero Hedge article is right, and then another way, there's another underlying issue there, which is not always comfortable. This show has always been dedicated to the difficult conversations, and it's what I do. Let's take a look at this. This is technocracy.news. Patrick Wood. Yeah, he took this article, The Fourth Turning. Globalism is dead. Technocracy is reborn. And you see, this is, again, the technocracy movement going back to the 1930s. And he says that the theory of societal turnings, and in particular the fourth turning, attempts to explain why the old globalization is being destroyed and the new global order is rising. That new global order is technocracy, and President Trump is the disruptor. Trump is wielding Thor's hammer to crush the old while embracing technocracy as arch technocrats impose their blueprint for scientific dictatorship. This is why Curtis Yarvin's theory of the Dark Enlightenment is increasingly popular with Silicon Valley technocrats. They want to install a monarch, ditch the political system, and appoint themselves to run everything like a sovereign corporation, a Sovcorp. The Sovcorps will own all the land and resources throughout the world using UBI, Universal Basic Income, to pacify populations as the world slowly depopulates. In the meantime, the world will be increasingly run by AI and later by AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, and ASI, Artificial Superintelligence. When you study historic technocracy from the 1930s, you will see all the above peeking through. Early technocrats openly called for FDR to declare himself dictator, dismiss Congress, and appoint themselves from the top to bottom to run the country. The technate. Technocracy has been biding its time over the decades, methodically building its infrastructure, gaining adherence, and jockeying for position. Now the coup d'etat is well underway, but this time it's on a global scale. Patrick Wood asked, did Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller understand the fourth turning when they co-founded the Trilateral Commission in 1973? Well, the book that brought them together was Brzezinski's Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, which predicted the end of the nation state and the rise of technology. Well, this is a good companion piece to the actual article, and I thought this is where we're headed, folks. I mean, and regardless of the political, this is why politics in general doesn't interest me. I cover it because of intelligence. I mean, not that it's like the Megadeth song, the military intelligence, 2 words to get together that don't make sense. But this is supposed to be intelligence for the sense of you having information to make the best possible macro decisions. And there are some times to be an activist and to fight for what's morally right, for liberty and the rest. But, if you're talking about a rigged system, I saw wrestling on the other night at the bar, and I'm like, I asked who I was with, I said, did you know the difference between politics and wrestling? And there's no. And I said, nothing. There's no difference. And so, anyway, I'll go through this this article because it is apt. I mean, cyclical history is real. And if you go back to the mid-90s, you have the book The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe. It's very important because if you go back and look at that and you look at history, they were right. I mean, there's so much that they got right about that part of this, the human story of how history goes in cycles. And it's funny because we're at the 80 years after World War II, and we're just going to make this a holiday. I mean, there's no coincidence there. We're trying to sanctify that or put, that was, the good war and our finest hour, all that stuff. We want to put, a new spin on it. But we're 80 years past, so now this is the new turning. And again, we'll get into this article from the original from Zero Hedge. It says, history tells us that civilization and societies boom, bust, and rise anew to repeat the pattern, a pattern that demographer Neil Howe says is surprisingly predictable both in its timing and trajectory. Howe refers to these seasons of societal change as turnings, and he famously has declared America is now well within the fourth turning, the bust part of its cycle, where the status quo falls apart, often chaotically, and is replaced by a brand new order. He says, well, it's in the first 100 days, the Trump administration has certainly made big, and some would say disruptive or even chaotic strides to attempt to replace the previous status quo with a new playbook, both domestically and internationally. And says, is this the kind of textbook fourth turning upheaval that Howe expected? Neil Howe affirms that the global shift from globalization to nationalism driven by Trump's America First policies are parallel movements. Maloney in Italy, Modi in India is a hallmark of the fourth turning. This trend, accelerating since the 2008 financial crisis, reflects a rejection of the U.S. subsidized world order with Trump criticizing globalization as a bad deal for America. Well, this is all true, like on paper, and that those movements have been there for a long time. This is nothing new. There was the outlet in 2016. That was somebody just had to pick it up. It's like Lenin used to say about the Bolshevik Revolution. It's the power is just lying in the streets. Somebody had to go pick it up. Pat Buchanan knew this in the 90s after, even before NAFTA and during the fight against NAFTA and what was going to happen to the United States deindustrializing and giving away so much of its wealth and technology and jobs and infrastructure after the fall of the Soviet Union. That was in a crisis moment for America. So even in 1992, Pat Buchanan takes on George H.W. Bush in the Republican primary, almost wins New Hampshire. I mean, it was so close, folks. Like, he was taking on a sitting president, almost wins New Hampshire, picks up a couple of more states, was given he had so many delegates too. I mean, so he's taking on a sitting president and a Bush, by the way, and he takes him on and does some serious damage because people were unhappy. Buchanan tells the story of going through the line, meeting people in New Hampshire, and he goes to this. He's reading some factory workers, and he goes to one of the men standing in line, and the man didn't say much. He just looked at Pat, with like a haunting look, and said, "Save our jobs." And that really bothered Pat. Like, he really wanted to do something to bring those jobs back, and the things that we're losing because of globalization, because of the New World Order, all the things that America was just put on this chopping block, like it was like one of these vulture capitalists, like a Mitt Romney, just buying up America and selling it off piece by piece. That's what was happening. So, a lot of this was happening way before 2016. I just want to, for the historical record, and I mean, yours truly, I ran for Congress on this very platform. I felt like the people loved it. The establishment didn't know what to make of me. Even like, the radio host I was with, and people would say, "Oh, you're talking like a lib. That's lib stuff." I'll never forget that. I'm like, well, you just don't have any historical sense. And that's the trend. So that is correct. But the reason I led with Patrick Wood's analysis about the technocracy is look at the head fake, right? That's what you have to pay attention to. That's regardless of who wins the presidential election, whether it's Kamala Harris or Trump, there's different avenues, but that is still, the blueprints for the central bank digital currency. You can't lose your vigilance when you're talking about opposing something like that, because the technocracy has the same plans. They just do it a different way. They'll do it through stable coins. They'll do it through public-private partnerships. It's just a different recipe for the same outcome. A 15-minute city sounds like a dystopic hell, but if you say it's a freedom city and you put MAGA next to it, then all of a sudden it sounds great, right, to those people. See, it's language, and it's also tactic. Howell notes widespread support for reindustrialization and immigration control, aligning with populist demands for economic sovereignty and cultural identity, a classic fourth-turning dismantling of established systems. Howe explains that this bust phase, characterized by the collapse of the status quo and the rise of a new order, is not limited to the United States, but is synchronized globally with populist, nationalist, and authoritarian movements emerging worldwide. It says the trend in the West, certainly, and now the rest of the world we've seen a synchronization of these turnings. It's global. It's now global. He highlights the Trump administration's disruptive policies, such as tariffs, immigration, crackdowns, and deregulation, and emblematic of fourth-turning chaos. Trump is a necessary figure, unleashing something pretty primal. Where it goes, though, I don't think even Trump understands. Well, we've talked about that too. I mean, I love the idea of economic nationalism. It actually works. I'd love to bring the jobs back, but you have to make see, if you add a tariff on top of the income tax, then you just have another tax. So the best thing to do would be eliminate the corporate income tax or all income tax. Why not? Have an external tax. Have a consumption tax. Look at the fair tax. But we didn't do. We added another tax, and then it's like I saw an article one of the largest jewelry makers in the world. They're like, we're not moving to the U.S. You don't understand. There's too many moving parts. And again, that's supply lines. It's time frames. There's a lot of disruptions going on. He says that he notes inherent contradictions, particularly between the role trade protectionism and fiscal deficits. You cannot eliminate trade and therefore credit flows from the American economy while running up the deficit. We will literally have nothing left to invest in capital. Howe predicts increased volatility, legal battles, and potential crises, economic, political, or geopolitical, that could catalyze major institutional reshaping by the 2030s, when a new first turning may emerge. And so the first turning after this is the end of there's 4 turnings, right? So it's the fourth. A turning is 20 years. And this is biblical. Lincoln said that. It called it a score, 4 score. A score is 20 years. 4 score and 7 years ago in the Gettysburg Address. Well, that was the 87 years after the beginning of the American Revolution. Right, so that's a turning. And so another turning would be the Great Depression and World War II that just culminated. That's the end, in 1945, 46. And so we're at the end of that cycle now. So the next beginning would be 2030s. Folks, this is why you see not only Agenda 21 from the United Nations back in the 1990s. And by the way, wasn't that 92? Like what I was just talking about, where you see the ramp up of deindustrialization and other things it's kind of like a whipsaw. Like you take it away and then you create the political environment to try to restore it, which is an upheaval, and it lose faith in institutions, right? You can also pre-engineer some of these things or make them work in your favor. History is not an accident. There is a lot of things that are organic in history. There are some things that are, because this is God's world. Like it's not, just because you have advanced simulations and you have, a printing press and you can put fake fiat Luciferian bankster notes into the system doesn't mean you get to control every aspect of reality, but so much of it is controlled. It's not what you learn in school. And sometimes you can't escape history is something you have to go through. It's like these repeating patterns, but you can misdirect it. I've often thought that 9/11 was a bend in the river, like something that really wasn't on track to happen. But you look at something that would be a misdirection, a way to change course. Project for a New American Century got that right. They're very prescient. Talk about me being prescient. September 2000, Project for a New American Century. Bill Kristol, William Bennett, others, Richard Pearl. New Pearl Harbor style event needed for their rogue state rollback. Boy, they got that 1 year later. That's kind of weird to get a thing that you asked for in the in the document itself. Howe advises investors to focus on absolute returns, hedge against volatility, and prioritize assets like commodities, gold, defense, and infrastructure, while emphasizing personal resilience to navigate the turbulent period ahead. Pay most attention to financial professionals that talk a lot about absolute return and don't get sidetracked into looking at the relative return of other indexes. Well, I never give investment advice. You know what business I'm in. I'm in the business of real, to the best of my ability. I'm in commodities. I'm in finite. I'm in housing value. And I see so much fake built into the casino stock market, as my friend Don Jeffries says. 80% have to lose, so 20% can win. And it's probably not even those odds aren't great. It's probably more like 99% have to lose. But that's where we are. I mean, you talk about volatility. There's going to be so much change. This is where we are, and there's no, you can't bury your head in the sand. It just is what it is. I think there's a lot of opportunity in it. I think there's more upside for us that are aware than downside, honestly. And it gives you opportunity when institutions are crumbling, whether it's how's the public relations with the Fed going to be when you reach 130% of debt to GDP? How's the Treasury going to look? I think Congress already has a lower approval rating than liver cancer. I mean, this is like, it's not good, folks. These institutions that people once were like, yep. You go back, look at some of the propaganda videos from World War I and World War II, and people just like, yep, that's what we're going to do for the most part. And you can't run that kind of stuff today. You have to run it inadvertently. You have to run it through the politics. You have to set up, and in a lot of ways, like a WWE infrastructure. You have to get people invested in teams and other things so they suspend disbelief. That's the way you get new propaganda. So it's not, there has to be subtle changes in the way things are done. The new golden age is unlikely to emerge directly from Trump's agenda due to legal battles, e.g., tariff laws and economic fallout, recession risk from labor cuts. Neil sees history resolving contradictions, potentially forcing fiscal discipline by weaning America off foreign credit, a painful but necessary step. Well, and that's pretty much where it ends. We're going to go through that. And you don't have to be a genius to understand what de-dollarization is. You just look at the math, and math doesn't care about your politics. Math doesn't care who your favorite candidate is. Math doesn't care. It just is, right? It just exists. And the math says when countries continue to de-dollarize, which they are, and I've been tracking this for many years, there will be a fiscal, economic, monetary reset. And that's even my terms. I mean, that's what they call it. That's what the overlords, right? The people that walk between the raindrops, whatever you want to call them, that's what their simulations are showing. They know that. And in a certain kind of letting the vampire in kind of way or revelation of the method, they have to tell you this. They tell you this is what you're looking at. So if you're aware of it, then you're already way ahead of the game, because most people think, and we all have this to some degree, but some more than others, you have normalcy bias, or you're paying attention to something that isn't real. So I try to advise against that. You don't get emotionally invested in any of this. You get invested in yourself and what difference you can make. You change yourself, you can change the world. They don't teach you that, right? It's an internal struggle. You do that, you change that, it will change outwardly. But that's the last place anybody would look, right? They always think it's external. Work on yourself, and you can change the world. All right, let me go to the chat. I've neglected the chat. Every show I'll get going on these stream of consciousnesses, and I'll miss the chat. I see over on YouTube, Harps is in the chat, and Freethinker 59. Good to see you guys. I see Guard. Guard showed up. Yeah, Guard says about Pat Buchanan that the GOP establishment in New Hampshire hated Pat Buchanan. Yes, they absolutely did. He won New Hampshire in 1996, by the way. If you think this is a new movement for nationalism, it was just repressed. Nobody had anywhere to go. Let's see. Jippy Joe Nathan, I like over in Rumble's chat, says, would love to have a year of Jubilee. I would love that too. If you got fake money, why don't we just start over? Let's see. Dustin Helms in the chat. I can see you guys. Soundwave promotion. Yeah, Soundwave. Well, Randy's asking what clips should you take from the show? Yeah, I'll message Randy. He makes every week or so, he makes a clip of me. And they're really great. So check out Soundwave promotion. Hey, make that a clip, Randy. Appreciate you, brother. All right, we're blowing through this show today. These transmissions are so much fun. Okay, let's jump over into some financial stuff. I mean, I was going to cover foreign policy today. Let's do that. Let's do some financial stuff. Kitco. Let me stop this screen, put this one back up. Yeah. And I'll tell you what this means. This is Kitco. Gold price down on profit taking, better risk appetite. What that means is those who have bought in to the contracts and bullion, the physical stuff, they're selling off for liquidity because markets love certainty, right? And there's a little bit more certainty, or at least that's the Fed is going to hold position. It's not raising rates, not cutting rates. It's exactly where it was. And there's a new deal with the UK on trade, or at least that's the proposal. Gold and silver future prices are lower in early U.S. trading Thursday on some more profit taking following gains scored earlier this week. Improved trader investor risk appetite in the general marketplace late this week is also bearish for the safe haven metal. A firmer U.S. dollar index today is negative outside of markets for the metals. June gold was down $40, and this is kind of talking about the futures, which I don't. It's funny. I got asked the other day by my IRA company. I guess they caught some of their dealers or somebody was taking the funds from customers and betting on future markets, and I'm like, look, I would never do that. Who has the time? I mean, but I don't do that. That's crazy. No, I get. It's funny. Whenever I get a deal from a customer, I told them, I was like, I want that money out of my account. So if you're dealing with me, it goes to the trading floor. Like, I want that locked in metals immediately. I do not want any risk for myself or my customers. So just a little bit of inside baseball there. Asian and European stock markets were mostly firmer in overnight trading. U.S. stock indexes are pointed to solidly higher openings today in New York. Risk appetite is keener today following news that President Donald Trump announced a big news conference Friday morning. He said the news conference entails a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country. Reports say the country is the United Kingdom. Trump added the action will be the first of many. However, the specifics of such a deal remain unclear. In other overnight news, the Bank of England cut its main interest rate by 25 basis points, or a quarter. The move was widely expected. So just a little bit to digest that. What it means is exactly what I said, which is a little bit of market certainty, a little bit of good news for those who are trading in things that are more volatile and require some certainty. And so there's some profit taking, which means for you, if you are buying precious metals, great. And that's for me. I like it when gold takes a little bit of a dip. That means it's time to buy a little bit more. And you'll see these are always signals to buy. What's funny is when this happens, people think, well, I guess the ride's over and gold's going to start going down. Folks, let's see what spot price is right now. Yeah, gold's at 3,309 Luciferian Bankster notes per troy ounce. It's down $76.45 since opening bell. Silver just reached under $33 at $32.47. Great. And especially silver. Okay. We're going to be talking more about that. I've been thinking a lot lately about doing a new show that is once a week, and we'll do it live, and we'll answer questions and all that. And it maybe just don't have a time limit. Maybe it's a shorter show, maybe it's a longer show. But we'll do the major headlines of the monetary system, the geopolitical monetary system, the entire economic world order. We'll do that, a breakdown once a week. So if you guys are interested in that, please let me know. I'm thinking about doing that. And when we do that, we can be live pretty much anywhere. I don't have to worry about what I say because it'll all be this kind of stuff. There's so much I want to talk about when it comes to what I'm seeing on the ground with physical things like silver and where I think it's going. What I'm personally doing, I'd like to talk to you about that. But gold's down. So, yesterday, I think, what did I say? It was yesterday we hit over $3,400 an ounce. So it's down a significant amount. And that's just an opportunity to buy, folks. Okay. Just an opportunity to buy. All right. I'm going to get out of this screen. As I told you earlier, the Bitcoin price is at 101,000. Let me refresh this. 101,210 Luciferian Bankster notes. 101,210.92 for one Bitcoin. And that again is based off what? Market certainty, no rate changes. Markets love certainty, folks. A lot of the headlines here just kind of echoing what I just said. And so we're back over 100,000 for the first time in a while. And then, it was 108,000 and some change on Inauguration Day, which was January 20th. And it has since then just taken a dive, and it was down even into the, I want to say, flashpoints into the mid 70s, high 70s. And this whole time, Wise Wolf Bitcoin, I just have a set buy and I continue to accumulate. And I'm doing that because I think this is one of those also, and I want to get into this more, in a financial centered show. But I think there's a lot here and something to watch. This is one of the commodities that I've been in since 2016, and I'm watching very closely. And I think it's going to be directly tied to this monetary reset in some way. And we'll just watch it to see what happens. But I think that price is probably a base level somewhere in there. 100,000 will start. It may be going, to some profit taking, doing other things that it does. But we're steadily climbing. There's just too much inflows of big players right now, and more adoption. All right, let me see what else is on the screen. I had some foreign policy stuff I wanted to get into. And did you guys see the not to, I don't want to get, go into too many details on jabs and other things. You guys know the drill, especially when you're on these type of platforms. But the headline on Drudge made me laugh today because it had to do with Bill Gates. And let's pull this one up. The headline on Drudge was Gates going after Musk. And not that I care all that much, but it just, people forget for some reason, like it's mainstream media, which is owned so much by, that's why MSNBC is Microsoft NBC, right? So much of Gates and his little sweaters and things. He had just a ridiculous thing. He says, Bill Gates claims that Elon Musk is killing world's poorest children. Okay. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has reignited his ongoing feud with Tesla CEO Elon Musk, accusing the world's richest man of killing the world's poorest children through funding cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, overseen by Doge. This was in the Financial Times. Gates pointed to the slashing of grants to a hospital in Mozambique, claiming that cuts have undermined efforts to prevent mothers from passing HIV to their newborns. Well, certainly aid has been cut and other things. And this is kind of the straw man arguments about all these things. Like, well, if you cut all that bloated waste, then, this is what's going to happen to the children. This may or may not be true. And if it is, like, Gates, you certainly can raise the money and you can do this yourself. But then I started thinking of just nobody ever asked him, like, if you were a reporter, if you're with the Financial Times, you want to bring up, how about those oral polio vaccines, Bill? How about Africa? How about that TED Talk where you're like, if we do a really good job with healthcare vaccine, we can lower that number by 15% or some, whatever he said, which was the population itself, which is like 1 billion people. So, it's like getting moral advice from Beelzebub. It's like asking Charles Manson, do you think this is too violent? Things like that. And it's just a ridiculous clown world. And not that I am taking a side there or anything, but that's just, I went and looked up. There's so many, they scrub so much from the internet. And I used to have, I wish you could see it off camera, folks. In 2020, I did so many live reads of articles. I stacked them up. I had like just whole counters full of articles. I was going to go back through them. I've since shredded them. but I should have kept them because a lot of that had that information on some of those things that we could talk about going in with Mr. Bill. All right, last article of the day. We'll get you guys out of here. All right, let me jump over here. I was going to go into. This is just a little bit of intel. We'll do this really quick, and then there's a little 10-point thing on preparing yourself. We put a lot into this show. So this is the second to last article. Preparing yourself for economic downturn. I thought that was worth going over really quick. But this is something I saw on antiwar.com. Just so you know, this is in the rumblings. This is stuff I look at that doesn't make the political headlines, but should be considered. Something that I've worried about. This is off through antiwar.com and then responsiblestatecraft.org. Trump considering U.S.-led Iraq-style occupation of Gaza. Officials are reportedly looking at the Coalition Provisional Authority as a model. If you don't remember, that was Paul Bremer. And, Paul liked to wear suits with his desert issue combat boots there in the green zone in Iraq. And everybody knows Iraq is an absolute model for success. We did a great job, just defiling that civilization and turning it over for freedom. Last time I checked, it's doing great, right? The Trump administration is reportedly considering a plan for U.S. to lead the administration of Gaza after Israel's siege, similar to how Washington ran Iraq after the 2003 American-led invasion. Reuters reports there have been high-level discussions centered around, this is Reuters, right? Not just somebody that's speculating. A transitional government headed by U.S. official that would oversee Gaza until it had been demilitarized and stabilized and a viable Palestinian administration had emerged. The sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, as they were not authorized to discuss the talks publicly, compared the proposal to the coalition's provisional authority in Iraq. Most experts cite the CPA as the catalyst for an impending insurgency that mired the U.S. military in a war in Iraq for more than a decade. That's exactly right. From which hundreds of thousands were killed at a cost of upwards of $3 trillion. Well, just so you know, that's on the table. Okay, just a little bit of intel for you there, and not in the major headlines. And that is absolutely one of the worst possible scenarios that I can imagine sending any U.S. military to. You talk about a no-win meat grinder war with no good outcome. And then you have to ask yourself, how does this help defend my Constitution and my beloved republic and my home and my family? How does that do that again? What did I raise my hand for? To swear allegiance to? What does this have to do with anything? The answer is nothing. And it would be, if you die over there, you die for nothing. So seems like a satanic errand to me. So I would be opposing that with everything I have, just so we're clear. All right, one last article. And so if we can get through this, we got about 7 minutes. 10 ways to adapt to the economic collapse unfolding before us over on Natural News, and put an article up on the screen. Just some, keep your mind organized here. The global economy is teetering on the brink of collapse with inflation soaring, banks failing, world trade unstable, and governments printing money at unprecedented rates. The U.S. dollar, once the world's reserve currency, is rapidly losing value, leaving millions vulnerable to financial ruin. But those who act now, shifting wealth into durable assets, acquiring survival skills, and fortifying their homes, will be the ones who thrive when the system crumbles. And you don't have to be like an alarmist and say the entire thing's going down, but just have a mindset of not relying on the current system. Always a good thing. Key takeaways. Convert dollars into tangible assets like gold, silver, ammunition, tools, and food before hyperinflation erodes purchasing power. Well, you may ask, when is hyperinflation coming? And I don't know that it will ever see a Weimar style republic, Germany in the late 20s, early 30s with wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. I don't know that that's coming. I think that can be a bit of alarmist, histrionic. I'm not going to say that's coming. But if you look at the eroding power of the dollar against something like gold, it's not hyperinflation, but it's it's hyperinflation adjacent. You look at gold in 1971 was $35 an ounce. Folks, we've almost hit 30. I think we have hit $3,500 an ounce. Yes, we have. We hit $3,500 an ounce gold. That's 100x. And that, gold doesn't suddenly become more valuable. It's just the dollar against that commodity, 100x. And that's what you need to look at, if you're trading your time and your energy for fake paper fiat currency, which we all do. That's the system that we're in. Trade it immediately or to the best of your ability for something, either investing in yourself or a fixed asset or something that's tangible, finite, something that has value in it. I like all of those options. Diversify precious metals into small tradable denominations. Avoid large bars that may be confiscated or impractical for barter. That's why Wolfpack's important. It's the Wolfpack.gold studios, folks. We take large orders, and we take even things like 100-gram bar sheets of gold, like 100-gram, the Combi bars. We break them. We give you your own coin flip. We put that in there, and we do that by hand. And we do the same thing with silver. You have a gram bar of silver. You can do silver dimes. You can do silver quarters. A silver dime. I remember Ron Paul saying that back in the 2008 election. He's like, I can get a gallon of gas back to a dime a gallon again. Everybody laughed. He's like, actually, a silver dime is worth $3. Stockpile essential goods, including water, filters, storable food, and medical supplies as supply chains weaken. Always a good idea. Water filtration, all that stuff. I love that. I need to buy more filters, as a matter of fact. And, you can collect rainwater, filter it once or twice. I did this on the homestead. Filter it through a couple of bandanas, get all the loose stuff out, then put it through, a gravity-fed water filter system. You got clean water. And you can go to preparewithart.com, preparewithart.com. That's where we get all of our storable foods and water filtration system. Master self-sufficiency, like gardening, foraging, hunting, and natural medicine. I need to do more of that. I haven't done enough. I mean, I have my old skills from being a kid, but I haven't done enough. I need to spend more time outside anyway. And it says, prepare for civil unrest by securing your home, learning self-defense, and recognizing criminal behavior before it escalates. Yeah, you should. Again, that's 101. Like, if you have the ability to protect yourself, do it. Learn how to safely store your firearm, ammunition, all that stuff. That's key. I carry something. Could you imagine me in the business that I'm in, traveling and not having what I use to protect myself and my shop and my employees? You got to have that. That's just a free society requires it. A polite society, as Alexis de Tocqueville noted, that especially the southern United States, very polite. That's because everybody's armed. That's always that's a sign of a polite society. It's an armed society and a well-prepared society. All right, folks, appreciate each and every one of you. I'll be back next week. All new transmission, Beans the Brave and myself. I'll be announcing something. I'm going to do a new show. I'm going to do something on precious metals and the geopolitical, financial, monetary system, a little bit of crypto and other stuff like that. We'll put that on the docket, and I'll do a post about it. I'll let you guys know. But you guys take care of each other. We'll see you next week. Okay. End of transmission.